Hi, I'm Taylor, a PhD student at Swinburne. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which I live and work, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So my paper today is a preliminary reflection on the interviews and ethnographic study of games events I did last year as part of my PhD, which is primarily focused on issues around safety and accessibility at those events. So I'm still passing through the mountains of data I gathered, so I just want to chat about some of the immediate takeaways from my findings in regards to how those events functioned online, the spaces that were created or used for them, and how each event's communities were engaged in playful ways throughout. So as we all learned last year from being unable to gather together physically, co-present event spaces are really important. Games events like festivals and conventions are vital sites of community engagement and industry networking. They offer the ability to share in something together and to construct a common sense of identity with other community members. They're also important for networking and for connecting with the game making community in Australia, given its size and precarity. Much feminist video game scholarship has focused on interventions such as safe spaces constructed by women, people of colour and LGBTQIA+ folks in order to play and engage with games without concerns of harassment or exclusion, as they often face in mainstream spaces. Indeed, games industry and fan events have been noted in scholarship as sites of harassment and gatekeeping toward women and other marginalised people by those in economic and social positions of power. So despite industry movements toward more inclusive mainstream spaces for games communities, it's clear that there's still progress to be made for everyone to feel completely safe and comfortable, hence my particular interest in events. So in a normal year, I planned to examine in-person events, but these are unprecedented times. And in 2020 Hellscape year, all my case study events shifted online because gathering in person became, in some instances, like in Melbourne, illegal, and in all cases, unsafe. My case studies are Free Play Independent Games Festival, Penny Arcade Expo or PAX, and Melbourne International Games Week, which I'll refer to as Games Week. None had ever been held solely online before, so to give a brief overview of what they looked like last year, Free Play is a volunteer-run independent games festival, and last year it took place over 5 days in the form of a conference live stream to YouTube. On the second last day, a digital hangout space made for the festival called the Free Play Zone was unveiled, providing attendees an embodied virtual space to coexist and interact in. In the zone, attendees could select an avatar, move through multiple spaces, and interact with each other through text chat. There are usually 6 PAX conventions globally each year, with PAX Oz taking place in Melbourne, but in 2020 all PAXs joined forces to become PAX Online, which was a 9-day long, 24-hour-a-day megalith event. Most of the content was non-stop speaker sessions, gameplay and tournaments, all streamed live on Twitch. The community gathered in a Discord server created for the event, with thousands of people interacting there at any one time. And Games Week comprises of many different games-focused events which take place throughout the festival, some industry-focused and some public-facing, all curated by Creative Victoria. It ran for 9 days last year with 15 different events throughout, all on different platforms, like Zoom, Twitch, corporate networking platforms, there was another free play zone, and so on. So while I very quickly talk methods, please enjoy the selfie I took at 3 AM during PAX when my cat kindly offered to help me observe the Discord. So Sarah Pink's reflections around short-term ethnography were really helpful to me, as she frames this kind of ethnography as an intensive, affective experience focused on being really embedded in the cultural context, which is helpful because I couldn't exactly spend any longer at each event than its short duration. So I paired that with digital ethnography approaches, such as Kishonna Gray's observation of online gaming communities to understand community practices in digital spaces. So basically, I hung out in my trackies, listening to talks, playing games and being silly with other attendees, taking part in workshops, and chatting in whatever form each platform afforded interactions between attendees. I am also conducting semi-structured interviews with attendees to get an understanding of their experiences of each event, and with organisers to gain insight into how the events are run. My first takeaway from the research was that online events have a remarkable capacity to be extremely fluid and reactive to the particular needs of the event and the community at any given time, in a way that isn't affected by the constraints of a physical event space, with the laws of gravity ruining the fun. As event organisers learned on the go what worked and what didn't, things were in constant flux. and the capacity for change and alteration on the fly kept things fun and interesting for attendees, but it was also really helpful for organisers to be able to make improvements on the event as it was happening. So this was seen in smaller ways, such as accessibility, modifications like closed captions and content warnings being added, adding dedicated Q&A chat boxes, creating new channels on the event Discord, and so on. But sometimes radical changes were made. So for example, the introduction of the free play zone completely changed the festival. Until that point, attendees could only interact by YouTube chat on the video for each session, with no interim space to gather between talks. The free play zone offered this shared space and people loved it. It was described to me as the next best thing to being together in person, and it really energised the vibe of the festival. Demonstrating the fleeting nature of an online event, the PAX Discord server was completely deleted on the end of the 9th day. This really challenged attendees' expectations of the event. There were a lot of pleas to keep the server open as they expected it to be a fixed, ongoing community space. So the video here is of the minutes before it was deleted. So about 10 minutes before the much dreaded server deletion, the admins pinged everyone into their line simulator channel for one last game of hitball, which is a bot game that simulates hitting a beach ball into the air as many times as possible as a group without letting it touch the ground. Naturally, 2,000 people arriving and spamming messages all at once was complete bonkers, and this continued until suddenly it was deleted and it all disappeared forever. So one of the organisers of PAX told me that deleting the server reminded him of a time when things used to disappear from the internet, leaving you with only the memory of the thing you experienced. To him, such a dramatic end to a very long event was a beautiful close to a story that only those there will share. I love this because it's evocative of the way a convention centre is packed up at the end of an IRL PAX, wiping away all evidence it existed except in photos and memories, which isn't something I expected of an online event. It was also clear to me that the spaces that were created specifically with the community in mind were the most successful in terms of engagement and good times vibes. An event space isn't one size fits all, so thoughtfulness regarding things like the platform that's used, how to best engage the community, visible pronoun badges, and so on really paid off. Across different events at Games Week, it was clear how small and close-knit the Australian game-making community is. This was reflected in the way people interacted with each other with familiarity, in-jokes, and excitement. At Games Connect Asia Pacific, or GCAP, there was a networking roulette activity, which would randomly match you with a person, and then you'd have 5 minutes to chat with them before it ended, and then rinse repeat. This was super popular, and people would often excitedly chat after a roulette session about getting to see friends or colleagues, remembering that this happened during the Melbourne lockdown when seeing anyone was literally impossible. I'm pictured here before I gave it a crack, being very anxious at the idea of talking to someone I didn't know. And look, it ended up being really fun. In this context, it worked because, again, networking is a vital part of industry events, and the community was already so friendly with one another. At both Free Play and PAX, it was really important that the online events reflected the vibe of the in-person events. So the Free Play Zone was a great example of this. It was created for the community by community members, and this was reflected in the Melbourne warehouse-esque setting, the Pride, Aboriginal and trans flags displayed in one of the rooms, the award-nominated games you could play throughout the space, and so on. The community reacted accordingly, with attendees expressing they'd never felt such a sense of belonging, and that it was a much more comfortable place to be than social media. Finally, games people love games. This really showed in the way each event's community interacted with the space and with each other. At each event, there was a lot of play. At Free Play, the baby avatar quickly became popular, and soon the zone was overrun with babies running around, playing tag and racing one another, and behaving like kids at a barbecue, in the best way. In addition to hitball at PAX, which I mentioned earlier, the PAX Discord had a kind of scavenger hunt activity, whereby using the look command you could search for prizes in the form of emojis that would be displayed in your name in the server. The community banded together to try to collect them all. There were about 100 by the end of PAX. And they worked together on puzzles and helped each other out. There was also an intermittent typing challenge, a couple of raffles, and a swag bag event, all which awarded emojis. Play was literally built into the space in order to engage and entertain attendees and to recreate the PAX vibe. A lot of the ways in which events were playful happened because the community felt like it was their space to enjoy, and sometimes to break. Also, a lot of the playful moments happen spontaneously, which is possible in a context where things are not so fixed. So this is really just the tip of the iceberg, but some really cool things happened with games events last year, and I'm sure they'll continue to do so. So overall, when done well, online events can be just as good, and in some cases, much better, than in-person events, as long as they're thoughtful about the way the event is constructed with the community in mind. Thank you so much.